And this week, once again, we read a double portion, Acharei and Kedoshim. Acharei meaning after, often referred to as Acharei Mot, after the death, of whom Nadav and Avihu, Aharon's sons, who we learned about in Parashat Shemini just a few weeks ago. Acharei opens with the commandments given to Aharon and the Kohanim regarding the entire service of Yom Kippur in the Mishkan. The Yom Kippur service in the Mishkan was a highly intricate sequence, and later in the parasha, the prohibition of offerings outside of the temple, and concluding with a list of forbidden intimate relationships. In Kedoshim, we move toward practical laws for everyday life. In Kedoshim, meaning holy, the parasha details dozens of ways to fulfill that calling, from respecting your parents and observing Shabbat, to the prohibition of slander, the prohibition to place an obstacle before the blind, to love converts, and many, many more. We begin with Parashat Acharei Mot, meaning after the death, of Aharon's sons, Nadav and Avihu, who died after they brought an incense offering they were not commanded to with a foreign fire. And in connection with that event, the parasha begins by warning the Kohanim not to enter the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, at any time except on Yom Kippur. And from there on, the parasha details the full order of the Kohanim in the Mishkan and later in the Bet Mikdash on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Yom Kippur service was different and far more complex than any other service on the other days of the year in the Mishkan. First, the Kohen Gadol washes himself, changes his clothes to fully white garments, and brings several animals for offerings, first for himself, and then offerings for the people, Am Yisrael. One of these offerings is the well-known scapegoat, not metaphorical, an actual goat. 2 adult male goats with similar appearance, height, and value are brought before the Kohen Gadol, and a lottery is drawn between them. For one, the Kohen Gadol draws the words LaHashem, to Hashem, which will be brought as a chatat offering on the altar, the Mizbeach. The second goat, LaAzazel. The Azazel goat is then led outside of the camp and into the desert with a designated person. And once they reach the rocky desert region, the goat is cast off. According to Rashi, Azazel refers to a harsh or elevated cliff. Az meaning hard. It's believed that the location was physically in the Judean desert, outside of Jerusalem, where the temple stood, and far into the rocky desert leading to the Dead Sea. Unlike the English phrase scapegoat, the Seir LaAzazel, the goat to Azazel, is not being blamed for the sins of the Jewish people. The Yom Kippur service does not look to deflect responsibility or shift blame from humans to animals. It concerns itself with human change. Sefer HaChinuch repeatedly teaches that a person is shaped by their actions, and therefore Hashem commanded us with tangible actions, mitzvot, commandment, which awaken the heart to tshuva, the essence of Yom Kippur. And although the service of the Kohanim in the Mikdash is not practiced in absence of the temple, Yom Kippur itself remains eternal. V'hayta zot lachem lechukat olam. This shall be to you an eternal decree to bring atonement upon the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And in Kedoshim, we are commanded, Kedoshim tihiyu, be holy, ki kadosh ani, for I am holy. And what's unique about the Torah is that it does not leave holiness as a vague terminology, and definitely not an abstract spiritual state. It's a daily practice. And in this parasha, we get super specific with all areas of life. Kedoshim covers laws of agriculture, personal grooming, employment, the justice system, and interpersonal relationships, and so much more. And according to Torah, it is through these everyday actions that holiness is built. by human beings in a human society through living a fully functioning and a whole and complete life through which holiness is built. And again, think of the Torah as the guidebook of the Creator. The Jewish people are commanded to be holy because Hashem is holy, and we are His representatives here on earth in the physical world. And by performing each and every one of these commandments, we elevate not only ourselves, but everything that surrounds us as well. So let's take a look at some of these commandments. And since we won't have time to cover all of them today, if I had to pick one, it would be Ve'ahavta lere'acha kamocha, translated in English to love your fellow as yourself, or love thy neighbor as yourself. But let's break down these words and specific individual letters in Hebrew. Loving your fellow as yourself is a pretty tall order. How do we achieve this? Ve'ahavta, and you shall love, meaning something preceded this commandment. Think of this ve and you shall love as a result of the preceding actions in the psukim leading up to ve'ahavta. And another distinction, ve'ahavta le're'echa, you shall love to your fellow, and not et re'echa, meaning we should treat another person in the same way we would want to be treated. Rabbi Akiva says about the pasuk ve'ahavta le're'echa kamocha, Ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a great principle of Torah. And why is it so fundamental? Several explanations. First, because from it there are countless derivatives of social behavior, and it is a fundamental recognition that we were each created in the image of Hashem, and therefore ve'ahavta le're'acha kamocha becomes an expression of loving Hashem. And for this reason, at the onset of the morning prayers, before connecting with Hashem, we set this intention by making the statement, Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat aseh shel ve'ahavta le're'acha kamocha. I accept upon myself the positive commandment of ve'ahavta le're'acha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. But how do we actually achieve this? The Torah does not expect people to naturally feel affection towards everyone at every given moment, and it recognizes that conflict, hurt, and misunderstanding exist. And so it gives the next steps. These are the psukim that precede ve'ahavta le're'acha kamocha. Lo tisna et achicha bilvavcha. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. Meaning there is no expectation that we void ourselves of any negative feelings towards one another, but rather that we not keep it in our hearts. Instead, the pasuk continues, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You shall reprove your fellow. Speak honestly and directly when something stands between you and another person. Velo tisa alav chet. But do not sin yourself in doing so. Meaning, one must be careful not to humiliate, shame, or act cruelly towards any person under the guise of honesty and openness. Lo tikom velo titor. Do not take revenge, which seems obvious, but also do not hold a grudge. When resentment builds internally, it often emerges later in another form. And although it doesn't always translate into actual revenge, it can appear as sarcasm, bitterness, anger, or any sort of negative feeling. And through these practical tools given by the Torah, do not hate internally, speak honestly, do not shame people, nor seek revenge or carry grudges, we can grow closer to that goal of ve'ahavta le're'acha kamocha in the most practical and applicable human way. And what about this word kamocha, as yourself? The Torah doesn't occupy itself with modern language or terms like self-love. It assumes that a person naturally seeks and wants their own good. There are instances, however, that people are more careful with others than they are with themselves. For instance, Lashon Hara. Be as careful with yourself as you are with others. And the pasuk ends with, Ani Hashem. These two words appear again and again throughout the parasha. Let's look at some of these commandments. The range is remarkable. everything from lo techale pe'at sadcha, meaning don't reap your field entirely all the way to the very edge, and instead, leket k'tzircha lo telaket. The edge of the field and anything that dropped to the ground is for the poor. And later in the parasha, different kinds of pe'ot, often pronounced as peyes. Lo takifu pe'at roshchem, ve'lo tashchit et pe'at zkancha. In Judaism, even haircutting and shaving are not merely matters of style. They also enter into the realm of halacha and holiness. There are mitzvot that are repeated, like kibud horim and observing Shabbat, and general commerce and employment laws, like lo talin peulat sachir itcha ad boker. Workers should promptly be paid for their work, and their compensation should not be delayed. There are also basic laws of justice. You shall not favor the poor, and you shall not honor the great. Amongst the most thought-provoking commandments is, do not curse the deaf, lo tekalel cheresh, and you shall not place an obstacle before the blind. Bifnei iver lo titen michshol. Plainly and obviously, one should not place a physical obstruction in the way of a blind person. But more broadly, not to cause someone to do something of which they are not fully aware of the consequences. Whether a person lacks sight, lacks knowledge, or experience, it is forbidden to mislead another person or cause them harm under the cover of their limited understanding. And why mention cursing the deaf? After all, a deaf person may not even hear the curse or negative words being spoken about them. The answer is that the commandment is not only about the person being spoken about. It is also about the person speaking. Our actions matter even when no one notices, and our speech matters even if no one is there to hear. Not only because Hashem is omnipresent, but because our behavior shapes the people we become. This idea appears throughout the Torah. Feelings and thoughts grow into words, which grow to actions. Our actions shape who we are, just as we learned at the start of this parasha, that it is through our actions that we become holy, Kedoshim. And let's look at this from another angle. You may have been on a flight landing in Israel where many of the passengers broke out in cheer and clapping hands. And the pilots who flew the plane across the Atlantic may not even hear that clapping. But this act of sincere gratitude affects not only the people who are to be thanked, the pilots and the staff, but also the people who expressed the thanks. And if you happen to be traveling by bus, remember, mipnei seva takum, you shall rise for the elderly, vehadarta pnei zaken. And another, hager hagar itchem ve'ahavta lo kamocha. The convert who dwells with you shall be like a native among you, and you shall love him like yourself. Ki gerim haytem be'eretz Mitzrayim. For we too were strangers in the land of Egypt. And as we said, these are only some of the mitzvot in this portion. Every time we perform any one of these mitzvot, we elevate not only ourselves, but all of those surrounding us. This week, we celebrated Israel's Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut. And towards the end of this parasha, a reminder. Atem tirshu et admatam, you shall inherit their land, va'ani etnena lachem lareshet ota, eretz zavat chalav udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. Today and every day, we continue to bring Geula, redemption, closer through our thoughts, speech, and actions. We will meet each other next week for Parashat Emor. And until then, Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.